Hello there, and welcome back to our Rogue Squadron Let's Play. This week, with intelligence provided by Case and Moore, we'll be attacking an Imperial construction yard. There's lots that we have to blow up, so let's jump in our speeder and get to it.
Case and Moore said this is one of many small factories where the Empire produces its ties and walkers. This is a straight hit-and-run mission. It's not going to stop them, but it'll cripple them for a little bit. Be sure to destroy their scanning posts first. Also, a squadron of ties are out on a test flight, so don't waste any time. They could be back at any moment. Remember, take out those scanners first.
For this mission, we're on the planet Belmora, attacking AT-AT and AT-ST factories. This mission always got under my skin because it was a stealth mission that required you to take out the Empire's long-range scanners. It's a difficult task to pull off in an airspeeder, and not one that it was designed for. The T-47s were primarily designed to pull cargo or shipping. Their use at the Battle of Hoth was just because it was the only thing the Alliance really had or that was able to adapt to the cold. They're designed to work in atmosphere, and really you have to have a place to launch them from or a way to get them down to the surface before you can start using them. It's something you'd expect someone like General Riken to take into consideration when planning this mission. But he's a general and I'm just a guy with a controller. I know I'm just nitpicking, but it's one of those thoughts that I just had to get off my chest.
Rogues, they're blind. Now, take out those factories.
There wasn't much related to the planet Belmora that I could find. But because we're in a snowspeeder and taking down walkers, I figured it would be a good chance to talk about rogue pilot Garrick Hobbie Klivian. Aside from Luke Skywalker and Wedge Antilles, Hobbie is probably one of the most well-recognized pilots who flew with Rogue Squadron. And in this case, it's not so much talking about the books or the comics today, although there is still plenty I can talk about with those. Hobbie first appears as part of the evacuation from Echo Base.
Two fighters against a Star Destroyer?
In both canon and legends, Hobbie was a defector from the Empire. Hobbie, as we discussed in an earlier video, was part of the mutiny on the Rand Ecliptic with Biggs Darklighter. In Legends, the mutiny was depicted in the comic book Empire. Also, after years of playing this game, I don't know if you had caught it, just a moment back, the Turbolaser had taken out one of their own TIE fighters, something I never thought I'd see. If you missed it, it is worth the rewind. But, back to Hobbie. In canon, he still does have a role in the mutiny in the Rand Ecliptic, but his initial defection to the Rebellion came much earlier. This story is told in the Rebels episode The Antilles Extraction in Star Wars Rebels. In this episode, the Ghost Crew goes undercover and extracts both Hobbie and Wedge from the Imperial Star Strike Academy. Hobbie is also one of the initial pilots with Luke and Wedge at the founding of Rogue Squadron. He is introduced briefly at the beginning of the Mutiny at Mon Cala storyline, and he's also present at the foundation of the squadron in the Hope Dies storyline. Hobbie flies with the Rogues until the Battle of Hoth, where the Legends and canon storylines have two different outcomes for him. To put it bluntly, in canon, Hobbie is dead. In the original script for The Empire Strikes Back, Hobbie dies flying his speeder into Blizzard 1, General Veers' AT-AT. While the scene was cut from the movie, it did appear in the novelization. If you hunt around for it, you can find some rough cut footage of the scene. I believe I remember it being on the Blu-ray collection of the 6 movies as well. In the short story Rendezvous Point by Jason Fry, in the Empire Strikes Back from a Certain Point of View collection, Hobbie's loss is one that weighs heavily on Wedge. Given their history together, that they defected at the same time, and the missions that they've flown with each other, the sudden loss of his friend is one that weighs heavily on Antilles, and in this collection, Fry writes, "Now his friend was dead, and a galaxy without Hobbie struck Wedge as an impossibly cold and cruel place." Hobbie does make a cameo of sorts in the short story When Fire Marked the Sky, from the Return of the Jedi from a Certain Point of View book. In this story, Lando recommends that Wedge have another round of a popular drink that everyone's having at the time, a Klivian. Clearly something that him and Janson would have put together to remember their fallen comrade and former rogue pilot. It's a small touch in the story, but one that I think adds so much and tells so much about the characters, especially Wedge, that we're dealing with. The best part of researching this video has been sitting down and forcing myself to finally read these books that I've wanted to for so long, and find out what happened to my favorite characters in canon now. At this point though, that's everything in canon that we have about Hobbie. Now, in Legends, the story is different because Hobbie and his gunner ejected from their speeder before it crashed into Blizzard 1. The two of them had made it back to Echo Base and escorted the last transport out of the system. Hobbie continued to serve the rogues after Hoth in engagements like the Battle of Endor. He was also one of the main characters in Michael Stackpole's X-Wing Rogue Squadron comic book and novels. Hobbie would continue to fly with the rogues and assist with the liberation of Coruscant, participated with the rogues' actions in the Thrawn campaign. Klivian would remain in his X-Wing until retirement. As a pilot, he was known for getting himself injured and often destroying the ships that he was flying. His fellow pilots often joked that he had an addiction to Bacta, so it seems appropriate after retirement he would go to work as a spokesperson for a Bacta company. For me, Hobbie was always one of those characters that stood out with a classic line, 2 fighters against a Star Destroyer. It's really interesting to see the different ways that Legends and canon took his story, and to be frank, I'm happy we have both. It wasn't until this playthrough that I realized there was that third speeder and I had no idea who was in it, so I decided Hobbie was flying it.
Good shot, Janson. It sure is nice to take the fight to the Imperials for once. It seems like we're always playing defense. Thanks to Case, we may just turn the tide of this war. Now let's head home. I need to paint some TIE fighters on my fuselage.
That's it for our Let's Play this time though. Hope you enjoyed it and will join us next time when we blow up some stuff on Kyle 2. Until then, McClunky.